Welcome to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my dear friend and co-host Jake LaQuire. How you doing? It's been a little hot. We had Memorial Day weekend. Were you able to get out of town, spend time with family at all?
Yeah, I was kind of driving all over the place. I went to my dad's house. Didn't see them though. I was watching like house sitting, dog sitting for him and stuff. But was able to go up see my grandparents too. It was like kind of a driving weekend, which is never the best, but seeing family is always good.
It is. No, it's always a great time to spend time with the family over the holidays. And to kick this week's episode off, we've kind of gone away from the beer of the week. I did kind of like a whiskey of the month, just doing a Jack Daniels kind of honey infused liqueur or liquor. And this week we're back to beers. We'll probably be back and have like a beer of the month for the next like 2 months until Jacob comes back on board around training camp. But this week we have Spaceman Spliff from Sycamore Brewing. We love Sycamore Brewing here. They are located here in Charlotte. Phenomenal drafts. If you guys live in the area, check them out. They have a couple locations. I think they have just the one location in
hmm
South End, right?
Yeah, because they
Um,
moved last year.
Perfect. So, without further ado, we're going to briefly talk about a Panthers topic that's kind of been hot on Twitter recently. And then we'll get into our top 10 skill position players and some of our honorable mentions that just kind of missed the list. So, do you want to kick off the Panthers section?
Yeah, why is it hot on Twitter recently, Steve? Who did that? Who could have done that?
I mean, I'm not a part of the entire beef, but I have definitely partaken in some
You've
of it,
uh,
whether
you've you've poked the fire a little bit.
yeah, no, there's an element of, and I've been quote tweeted by some four man rush guys. There's a Keep Purring podcast, and heads that up, and I've had some interaction with him. Ricky Rains, who is part of the Ricky Bobati show, and there's been back and forth arguments and discussions about what should be expected of Bryce in year two. And a lot of people are going, it's a new regime, it's a new coaching staff, new pieces on the offensive line, you add new wide receivers in the offseason. It should really just be ground zero. We're starting at year one again. And I don't think that's true. When we look at quarterbacks all time, and we've seen a lot of quarterbacks have coaching turmoil over the first couple of years of their career, there needs to be an expectation that they have a good year, a year where they're producing. And it doesn't have to be top 10. It doesn't even have to be like this elite performance, but it needs to be a performance where you go, this is a quarterback we can build around for the future. And that has to happen in year two. Otherwise, I really do think we need to start looking in another direction.
Here's what I'm gonna say because I'm more on the started over camp. My thing is we need to see Bryce be able to run this offense better than the Reich offense. The Reich offense, for all its quirks, I'll say, was horrible. No motion whatsoever. They lived in 11 personnel for, God, it seems like 95% of the plays at least. Since Reich was calling it, it switched up a little bit when Thomas Brown took over, but when Reich was calling it, no different alignments. It was the same three receivers and 11 personnel as well, same three guys. So no personnel intermingling or switching or anything like that. What we need to see is with Canales' scheme, with the new weapons between Deontay Johnson and the rookies like Leggett, Brooks, whenever he's on the field, I think they're going to take him slow to start the year. But I do think he'll be RB1 like pretty quickly once he hits the ground running. JT Sanders, everybody, even Jalen Coker, who I think will make the 53, the UDFA from Holy Cross. He has pretty good tape. I think he probably should have been like a fifth rounder or something, but glad we got him. All of that aside, and the new O line and stuff like that. With that in mind, I do think defensively we're going to take a step back from a defense that was already a bit overrated, in my opinion. We were a top 10 defense, like it's called total defense on NFL.com or ESPN, wherever the stat is kept. And all that is how many yards we allowed. And if we're a team that has short drives and a team that has a lot of turnovers like we were, obviously the drives for the opponents are already going to be shorter, right? Because they're getting the ball closer to midfield, closer to the end zone we're protecting. So the drives are already going to be shorter. We're going to allow fewer yards. I think that's a bad metric. We're pretty poor in scoring defense, third down defense, red zone defense. Those are the things that matter. I think with losing Brian Burns, Dante Jackson, for even though we kind of replaced them in the aggregate, I do think we might take a little step back. So that might be a proponent of why this team doesn't win many games. My point is to judge Bryce Young this year. I don't think it should be like, oh, we need to go out win 7, 8, 9 games. I think we need to see what he does. He needs to clean up his footwork a bit because as the season devolved and he, I guess, kind of rightfully got away from it with all the pressure and stuff. He needs to clean that up. We need to see him hitting receivers a bit earlier, I think, not holding onto the ball as long. And we need to see him work through progressions a bit better. And even though he was really good at making anticipatory throws early in the season, he got away from that because our receivers just stunk, for lack of a better word. Like you could see the Jags game, right? 3 anticipatory throws to DJ Chark. I believe it was 3 plays in a row or 3 out of 4 plays, all 25 plus yards, 3 drops. And like
Yep.
when you're a QB, especially a rookie QB, and that happens to you, you got to be like, I can't throw out in front of this guy. He has to be wide open. I have to put it on his chest for him to get it. And even then, he would still drop it sometimes. But he has to get back to being anticipatory, something he was great at in college. And I think he just needs to be more comfortable and be an NFL quarterback this year. I don't think that I think the win total is set at 5.5 currently for a reason. I think it's we can't expect it to be much more than that. But if we can hover around 4, 5, 6 wins, you got to keep in mind 4 wins is double what we had last year. We can hover around 4, 5, 6, and Bryce looks better. The offense looks better, flows better. I think that's a win, and we can go into the next year with cap space, with the probably a higher, like another high pick to add another good player. With all that in mind, saying, all right, now we can hit the ground running, attack the NFC South, go for it all. That's
Yeah.
like my kind of case on it.
I'm not saying Bryce Young needs to be in competition for like the NFC South crown. I'm not expecting that in year one of this system. I understand that you have to level some of that going into this season.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest thing is you were one of the worst offenses in the league last year.
Right.
And the last time we saw that from the Panthers in 2010, and then we add Cam Newton, we add some new pieces, Rob Chudzinski, Greg Olsen, some of these guys that add a little bit of juice. We went to a top 10 offense. And I'm not saying we need to be a top 10 offense, but we need to be at least average in the NFL because you can't build around a team that can't at least produce average results. And I think with the investment that is on the offensive line and some of the wide receiver options, and then adding Brooks and Sanders, you have to get production from those guys. Like that is just a given. I understand the defense can regress, but if you don't see at least average production, for me, like, yes, the win total, I really think it should be 6, 7 wins if we're going to call this a success. But I'd be okay with 5 if our offense is just lights out fireworks and our defense can't stop anybody for shit, for a lack of better word.
Yeah,
but like that's
and I'm with you there, right? Like we were probably bottom 3 in most offensive categories last year. O-line, horrible. Receivers, horrible. We were talking about receivers earlier. That's been one of the things on your little it's not Twitter beef. It's just we'll call it discourse. That's been a thing about Jonathan Mingo on ESPN's wide receiver score. He's second to last out of all qualified receivers in both overall and the open score. His YAC score was actually middle of the pack, which is something we kind of expected, right? But he didn't get open to have those YAC opportunities a lot of the times. So we need a little bit of growth from him. All that aside, with Reich being the play caller and everything, I do think the offense needs to be better. It needs to be, I would say, at least top 20. We need to see that level of growth because I still don't think we are like we have average skill position players. I still think we're below the curve there. I think our
But what's the word? Average. We need to play average. That's the expectation.
And I'm saying I still don't think that because you got to remember average is 16, right?
Yeah.
Would you call our receiver core top 16? I would not.
No, I would say our offensive line is above
top 20.
average.
Yes, offensive line, yes.
But that's what I'm saying.
Especially
like,
given
there was
the investment.
a give and take.
Yeah, but like, yeah, give and take is fair. But like, I don't think we should have the expectation to be a top 10 offense per se because you're not a fan of Canales' play calling either. You brought up 2011. Chud was a master play caller. Like people can say what they want. Rob Chudzinski was my favorite play caller in the Cam Newton era. Even including Norv Turner, who kind of refined Cam a little bit. Chud was just out there with bizarre ideas and stuff, and it worked. If Canales can do that, then I'm all in on the offense. But I think we need to temper our expectations. I know it's off season, or it's the off season, and as fans, we're going to become more hopeful, especially when we go to training camp. We see Bryce throw it to Leggett for like an 80-yard touchdown, and everybody's going to go crazy. But like, we gotta stay grounded a little bit because I still don't think this is a league average offensive unit. And so I think if we still hover, or if we hover around that 20th to like 15th in total offense, scoring offense, whatever, I think that's a win. especially coming up from 31st or 30th, whatever it was last year.
Yeah, and
But
I don't
and
know.
I'll say this: we have to win more than 2 games though.
It
Like
has
wins
to.
aside, we need to hit like 4 wins at least for me.
And I think all of last year we went above the 20-point mark like 2 or 3 games
Yeah.
out of the entire season. We need to do that at least on half of our games. Like this
Mhm.
is a league where you need to score points. So however you're getting them, ground and pound, you're getting it through the air. Bryce is scrambling, maybe he's scoring a touchdown or two, like we saw at the end of the year in that Tampa Bay game. Like those are the kind of plays and energy that's needed because if we aren't putting points on the board, we aren't going to win games. And that's what I think costs our defense a lot in terms of the red zone and third down is they would hold for so long and then it's just the dam breaks loose in the fourth quarter. So I know we're getting on a ramble, but this is just kind of the state of frustration where it's more trying to find that line where holding Bryce accountable is definitely in our best interest going
Right.
forward because I think you got to temper expectations because if he's not good, you can't keep holding on to a sunk cost. You got to move on from that.
You said temper expectations there instead of temper. You got whenever something bad happens with the Panthers, Tepper just kind of pushes his way into your head. But
That was
I'm
intended, but yeah.
yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, I do think we need to hold him, like, give him reasonable accountability and expectations. Like, I think it's hard to last year with, granted, he was not the best QB, but the entire situation around him was just putrid. From the
Yeah.
three P's, like we talked about, play calling, protection, playmakers, none of it good. And so I think with the hopeful upgrades this year, if we can start to see movement, like the O line's better. He's not given like what was it, 62 sacks last year, second most for a rookie behind the infamous David Carr year. If we're seeing that cleans up a little bit less pressures, if we're seeing more guys open down the field, that was an underrated bad thing about our offense last year. Reich's actual route combinations were just bad. Like you would have Thielen and Mingo running the same, like it'd be like Thielen runs a post and Mingo runs like a little slant out corner. Why do you have a like 40-year-old Thielen running that? Not Mingo.
Yeah.
It's bizarre stuff. But if we see improvement there, because Canales and Idzik they have wide receiver backgrounds, so I think they can get at least more out of, if not the most, out of our receivers there. And then if we can see Bryce making plays early in the season, I think I'll be on board, despite even if we don't win 7 games.
Yeah. And again, I don't think win total is what we need to look for. It's more just you need to see more juice. You need to
Mhm.
have a reason to believe in the keep pounding mantra. Like that's just we have lost that since about 2018 and finding that juice as a franchise, as a fan base is what's going to help unite us and actually like have something to root for. So that's really all
Mhm.
we're putting out there is our frustration as fans understanding that yes, if this isn't the answer, that we got to pivot, but there is hope that we can hit some of these goals and expectations and build around Bryce and him be the future. There's a reason why we took him first overall. I want that to come to fruition. I want him to be a good NFL quarterback and take us to the playoffs. We haven't been to the playoffs since 2017. Like we're getting close to a decade now, and I'm tired of feeling like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFC South. Like that is point blank where I'm at. But something we do agree on. And did you want to touch on the wide receiver holdouts
Uh,
before we get into the skill makers, or did you want to kind of
I
do
think
that as a
it's
wrap up?
I think it's kind of a good segue, right? Like for our like around the NFL section today, because not a ton of news, but with OTAs wrapping up for some teams and starting for other teams this week, there have been like notable receiver holdouts. Obviously, Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins both are not present for the Bengals voluntary. It's not minicamp. I think it's voluntary OTAs, and so I think that's a good segue because today we are talking about skill players. That's running backs, receivers, tight ends that we would want to build around for the next 2+ seasons. Last week we did QBs, and a lot of these guys are going to be receivers, right? I think naturally out of those three positions, receiver is the most important, right? And some of the best players in our league today, like Jefferson, Chase, them waiting on deals is something notable. CeeDee Lamb as well with the Cowboys. Like I think all three of these guys, given the Amon Ra extension recently, and it was AJ Brown was also extended, right? Like right after
Yeah.
the draft. With their big deals, and Amraz was huge. Yeah, it was 30 per year, right? It was 120
Yep.
over 4. I think with those kind of deals, we're going to need to see what the teams like the Vikings, the Bengals are willing to pay. The Bengals, historically cheap franchise before the Burrow extension, rather. But like what's going to happen there? And you'll see some of our picks here. In fact, my top four guys are going to be receivers waiting on those new deals. So it's going to be interesting to see who we value as guys to build around, and then who the actual teams value this summer, because I think it'd be a mistake to let any of the top four guys on both of our lists not walk into the season with a deal.
Yeah, you're going to have to get these guys locked up. And some of these guys where you know, like, hey, you're a tier below Jefferson. If he gets extended first or early on into the process, it's going to make it a lot easier for some of
Mm-hmm.
these other negotiations because now you have a ceiling. Where it's like with the Amon Ra deal, it's like, okay, if you have Jamar Chase or you have CeeDee Lamb sign the extension next, do they hit like 32 and a half and then Jefferson takes it to like 34, 35? It'll just be very interesting kind of like how the market keeps getting pushed up, because if Jefferson holds out to the end, he's obviously going to probably get a bigger bag than if he were to get paid first. So it's a whole game of cat and mouse between kind of like figuring out like, okay, who's going to sign first and then the domino effect from there.
And it kind of reminds me of the Brian Burns situation last year. This is a guy that the Panthers didn't extend early after year three, didn't extend him after year four. He had like a soft holdout during training camp, didn't get anything done there, and then no extension. And at the end of the year, he ends up getting traded, and then eventually gets, I guess, close to the deal he was wanting. I don't think he got the full. Well, I think he wanted like 1 mil under Nick Bosa, like 31. Didn't end up getting that, but still got a closer deal to what he was wanting, and the Giants were willing to pay it. I wonder if we see anything like that happen this season, before the season, or at the trade deadline, because a team like the 49ers, who, if they want to stick with Brock Purdy, are about to have a big like contractual obligation that they have to pay. So is Aiyuk going to be traded? Are they going to get rid of Debo? Stuff like that. But I think we can get into our list now, and both of us have the same number one skill player guy, and you can take it away if you want.
So, talking about the guy who's going to set the wide receiver market, the reason why he's going to reset it is because he is just so darn good. And that's Justin Jefferson out of LSU. This guy has racked up over his first 4 years almost 6,000 yards receiving, 30 touchdowns. This guy's a baller. Over the past 2 years, he's averaging 100 plus yards a game receiving. Like, he is just a monster. You can double team him, you can triple team him. And it reminds me of another Vikings player before, and this was before my time as like a football fan, but Randy Moss. When you look at some of his stats in his first couple of years on what would be the rookie deal nowadays, and he racked up over 5,000 yards receiving, similar to Justin Jefferson. And from a touchdown standpoint, completely dusted Jefferson. I think he's dusted everybody in that
Mm-hmm.
department with 53 touchdowns over his first 4 years, just gaudy numbers. But when you're in those ballparks and you are just a straight baller, he's going to get the top of the line market deal. And he's just that good. He is arguably the best non quarterback player in the NFL. And this is keep in mind with guys like Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons that can get after the quarterback and disrupt a game. Like, he is up there in terms of value.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I do think he is the best non QB in the league, especially with Aaron Donald retiring this offseason. He's the best offensive player other than Mahomes as well. Like, that's what's the like straightforward if he's the best non QB, but he makes a difference, right? Averaging over 100 yards receiving per game the last 2 years. Even with his injury this year, where he had to miss time, he still got 1,000 yards. Almost got
Exactly.
2,000 last year. He kind of fell short towards the end there. Almost sold my fantasy football championship there, but still got the win. And he was a big reason for it. He's just a monster on the field. And you talked about Randy Moss. It's bizarre to think that 53 touchdowns through his first 4 years, and that still wasn't the most touchdowns he had in a season, obviously, with New England later in his career. But the Vikings always seem to know how to get some studs at receiver. Got Jefferson, Stephon Diggs a couple years ago. Thielen, don't think about him as a stud. Undrafted wide receiver that comes in, Pro Bowler. Randy Moss, Chris Carter back in the day. And then they're going to, I have another young Viking on the list here. He's going to be towards the bottom. They just seem to know how to get the receivers in. I think, especially with a rookie QB in JJ McCarthy, that one, they're going to be able to afford him. And two, I think they're going to be motivated to get that deal done, because you don't want to draft a guy, especially who came from an offense that was very run heavy, and then leave him out to dry by trading away the best wide receiver in the game.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. I don't think the Vikings are going to do it. They've done a lot of smart cap related signings and just letting like Kirk Cousins walk and not extending some of these other players that have walked over the past 2 years. Daniil Hunter going to Houston, for example, like they aren't willing to shell out the bag because they understand they're going to have to pay their guy in Justin Jefferson. So I think the Vikings are very well aware of kind of the value and the talent they have. That's why they drafted JJ McCarthy, is to kind of take advantage of the rookie wage scale and try to still be competitive in a very, very tough NFC North this year. So I definitely think he'll get extended this year. But the two guys that we have right after this, and actually it's the next three, we have 2 and 3 slightly out of order, but these are other guys that are up for contract extensions. And at number 2, you have a rising star in Texas. And why is he at 2 for you?
CeeDee Lamb is number 2 for me. And I think what he's done over the last 2 years has been phenomenal, where Chase, out of the gate as a rookie in his second year, just absolutely gaudy receiver, helped them get to the Super Bowl. Had that signature touchdown against the Chiefs where it wasn't like a screen pass, but it was like a little 5 or 6 yard slant housed it, got them the win there. But I think CeeDee Lamb has done more in an offense that is, I don't want to say devoid of weapons, but when you look at the Bengals the past couple seasons, they also have T. Higgins, who in his own right is still very good. Tyler Boyd's a good receiver 3. And I think that with those guys in mind, Chase doesn't always have to be pressured or doubled or whatever every single play. Whereas CeeDee Lamb, despite him moving across the field a lot because he's versatile like that, I think he is by far the best player on the field, or best weapon on the field at any moment. And they have to worry about him more than they would, say, Brandon Cooks or man, I can't even think of the receiver twos they've had other than him the past couple of years. Like
They've
that's
had
just
Noah Brown and a
Noah
couple
Brown,
other,
yeah,
Michael Gallup. Yeah, they're just
yeah.
it's some like low
But like,
wide receiver 3 guys. Yeah.
but that's like Amari Cooper as well. But that's like the how good he is in my head, like how much of an impact he has, it erases those other receivers from my mind. I think what he did last year as well was phenomenal. He I think it was between him and Tyreek Hill. If you had combined their like total stats, like they would have had a triple crown. Like they kept each other from getting it. I think he's just been excellent for them this past, like I said, this past season. I thought he improved a ton. I think he's really taken the reins as that wide receiver 2 in the league. Whereas Jamar Chase, while he had that explosive start, he had an injury 2 years ago that kind of made him a little iffy at the end of or I think no, yeah, he came back at the end of that year.
It
Wasn't
was the
as
hip
good.
injury.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And then this year, while he still had a great year, I just don't think it was on CeeDee's level. And this is the goal of the exercise is the next 2 years, right? Who would you build around the next 2 seasons? I think I'm going to take the ascendant player, and that's why at number 4, that's why who I have there for that. But I'm going to take the ascendant player over the guy that, while he's still great, hasn't really been on that same trajectory per se as CeeDee Lamb has.
Yeah, and I would say CeeDee Lamb, the second half of last year, he took a massive step.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was the
He
true
he was
alpha
he was
male
the
in
engine
that.
of that offense. Like
He
Dak, I think Dak had a phenomenal season, but I think CeeDee Lamb was a big part of it. He was like
It
the
was.
reliable middle and downfield weapon for Dak.
It was all the timing stuff. That's what I loved about Mike McCarthy. They evolved throughout the year and they made sure, okay, CeeDee Lamb's our dude. We need to make sure we're getting him the ball. Just like the Vikings do with Justin Jefferson.
Mhm.
Like you have these star players, you have to feed them. And so in those cases, it works out great for him. So you alluded to Jamar Chase. He is my number 2. And the reason why he's my number 2 is because I think he's still very young. Like you
Mhm.
talked about, he dealt with that injury, not this past year, but the year before. Joe Burrow goes out this past year. So you lose a little bit of stability at kind of just being kind of present, everybody being on the same page. And so I think that affected him. But what he has that I think is better than CeeDee Lamb is that yards after catch. Like
Yeah.
he is a running back in the open field. And CeeDee Lamb is a yak monster. Don't get me wrong. I just think it's a different animal when we're looking at Jamar Chase. And then what Jamar Chase does on deep routes is just uncanny. I think he's one of the best deep ball wide receivers. I think if he can polish out some of his routes and work more underneath and kind of do what CeeDee Lamb did last year, working across the middle, working short, I think that's what's going to boost them. And that's why over the next 2 years, I feel like Chase can take a step as well, just like Lamb did, and really be just that dominant wide receiver in the NFL that he was projected to be coming out of college.
Yeah, I like all the points you made there. He and Burrow have been kind of desynced the past 2 years with the injuries on either side, and it's hard to hold that against either one of them. The truth of the matter is CeeDee and Dak have just been there consistently and grown like together the past couple of years. And hopefully we see that with Chase and Burrow next year. Like I said, Chase is 3 for me. You talked about him being a yak monster. He might be the best yak guy in the league after Tyreek Hill, who's like the fastest
Yeah.
receiver ever.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
really why Tyreek
and
Hill's
you
better.
can't
Yeah.
really like talk about him in that vein because Hill's just an anomaly in that regard. So he's number 3 for me. Super talented receiver. I do think Jefferson will get the highest, but I think between Lamb and Chase, it's going to be like Burrow and Herbert last summer. Whoever gets paid first, the next one's getting half a mil or a mil more or something like that. But I think both of them are excellent. They both deserve to be paid. And then number 4 is another guy who I think is excellent. I think deserves to be paid. This is a guy you were big on like a couple years ago. I think he really took a step this season though, and that is Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. I thought he could have been traded before the draft. Obviously, they stuck with him, but they ended up picking a first-round receiver, Ricky Pearsall. They picked Jacob Cohen in the 5th round, so his future might be up in the air there in San Francisco. But if I'm the Niners, I'm trading Debo. I'm keeping Aiyuk because what does Aiyuk do? What's my favorite trait about receivers, Steve?
You get open.
He gets open. He is an excellent, sharp route runner, and he just gets open. Even though Purdy isn't the best QB in the league, Aiyuk gives him these huge windows to where you can hardly miss him. He missed him in the Super Bowl a couple times, but other than that, like he's just a get open machine, and he's still very young. This is a guy that's was drafted the same year as CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, right? Yes,
Yeah.
that same draft and Jalen Rieger as well that year. But this is just really good player. Played with Jaden Daniels at LSU, or excuse me, at Arizona State. That's an interesting tidbit there. But he has to find a way to get paid. I think he'd be an excellent wide receiver 1 on a team like the Steelers or a wide receiver needy team. I know that's been thrown out there this offseason, but if he stays with the Niners, they got to pay him because, like I talked about with CeeDee Lamb being the guy that can get open over the middle and deep, that's what Aiyuk can do too.
Yeah, no, I mean Ayuk. You turn on the tape, and what he does, it could be goal line, it could be taking a route down deep. Some of his in breaking routes, his kind of curls, it's just gorgeous. Just watching Ayuk play football, like you said, came from an illustrious wide receiver class. Hopefully, we have some of that talent influx from this year's wide receiver class as well. But going back to, we alluded to this with kind of Mingo. ESPN does kind of like a wide receiver score. We talk about him getting open. He ranks 8th in their open metric. And then when we look at the overall score, he was first last year. And it's because not only does he get open, he catches the ball and then he's able to do work with it. And obviously, he's not a yak beast or yak monster like Debo is on that team, like we've talked about with even CeeDee and Chase on this list. But he's such an explosive playmaker. That's a guy that you want to keep on your team because that stuff translates no matter how old you get. We've seen it with Thielen here in Carolina. He's 30 something years old, but because he's a good route runner, his career is longer. So when you look at that, those kind of qualities and traits, and then how the metrics and stuff all that back that up, there's a reason he's asking for 30 million a year because he's worth every bit of it. So super excited to have him. He's 4th on my list. I didn't necessarily mention it, but CeeDee Lamb is 3rd on mine. I do think Lamb's just a cut above because of that explosiveness and him having to be the guy in Dallas. So I don't want to take anything away from that point. And the reason why you had him at 2 is just he's such a dynamic playmaker. And I think if Ayuk was given the opportunity, like he was traded to the Chiefs, he was traded to like the Bills, and they wanted a true wide receiver 1, he would thrive in that role. It's just we haven't seen that kind of fruition at this point.
Yeah, not to disparage Dak at all, but he's obviously not on the same level as Mahomes or Josh Allen, like you're talking about. So that would be something crazy if we were able to see something like that. But I can't imagine the Niners would trade Ayuk to the team that just beat him in the Super Bowl. Yeah, and you, I believe it was before last season, you were the one to mention, hey, the Chiefs should trade for Ayuk. Their receivers stink. And the receivers did stink, but they still got it done. So who knows with them? I guess having Mahomes makes it a bit of a cheat code. You talked about goal line with Ayuk. He might run the best whip route I've ever seen. You know what whip
Yeah.
routes are? It's like the little, whoosh, it's like a
Mm-hmm.
fake route like that. But he's one of the best out of maybe the best, and hopefully he continues to thrive for quite a while. And so our first 4, while they were the same 4 people, they're a little bit out of order. All of them are searching for new deals. We also have the same number 5. but he got another extension this year after his one a couple years ago when he was traded to the Eagles. And that's AJ Brown. He's a bit different from the receivers we talked about. A lot of these guys, actually, all four of these guys, I think, are really good at getting open. Jefferson and Aiyuk in particular are excellent route runners. AJ Brown isn't necessarily going to get the most separation out of anybody, but man, he's going to destroy people at the catch point. He's going to pull down everything. And after that, he's going to run you over because he's like 240 pounds and take it to the house. There was a stretch this year. And when we did our it was like best performances of the week, and we tried to mix it up because we don't want to have the same people on every week. But there's a stretch, I think it was 5 games in a row, where he had over 125 receiving yards and a touchdown, so we couldn't leave him off of it. And he's just that dominant. He's the big reason why Jalen Hurts was able to take a step forward. And I think it helps out his number two receiver, who I'll talk about in a minute, and Devontae Smith, who also just got paid. But I think what AJ Brown's able to do in terms of catch point and going through people afterwards is just phenomenal. And not to take anything away from him, he's really fast too. It's not like he's a super slow receiver that's going to do it. He'll beat you off the block if you aren't paying attention, and then still moss you and run through you.
I mean, you should have known AJ Brown was a guy that could run through you when you saw some of the pics of him
Yeah,
and
him and
DK
DK.
standing next to each other, and that was the prior to them getting to the NFL and even kind of getting bigger from there and just it like really playing bully ball because I mean you watched them all last year on the Eagles Super Bowl run, well 2 years ago now. And you just watched them like run over dudes and just high point and bring stuff down out of the air that like really nobody else could out of the guys that we've talked about here prior, outside of maybe Jefferson in a couple instances and maybe Chase. But he just has that physicality, and that just creates an issue from a schematic and lining up standpoint. And I know you said he didn't have as much separation, but he had the same open score as Brandon Aiyuk last year. My biggest thing is when I'm ranking him on this list, it's not that I don't think he has peaks like we talked about that 5 game stretch of 125 plus yards, one touchdown, that he is really just that true dominant guy. It goes back to the fact that he has injury history, and then because he's a bigger wide receiver, we've seen guys like Des Bryant or even Calvin Johnson where it's like you take an injury or two because guys are really trying to hit you because you're that bigger dude, and you can't take those hits as well as you get older. So that's my biggest hesitation with AJ Brown. I think he is still an elite wide receiver, should be talked about in the top 3, but for contract reasons, him obviously getting extended and then him being a little bit older with an injury history, that's my hesitation here.
Yeah, and we saw it with Julio Jones at the end of his career as well.
Yep.
Arguably one of the best, if not the best, like big body receiver. And at the end of his career, traded to the Titans, and also what he was an Eagle this past year, right? Or maybe it was the year.
Yeah,
No, it
for
was
a
this
brief
past
stint,
year.
it was
Yeah,
like with 80. Yeah, he
yeah,
wore like a tight end number, which
yeah.
was wild.
I was like, what tight end? They have Dallas Goedert, right? Who is their new tight end? It was Julio, and glad to see him catching touchdowns still. But like you said, I think when you take all those hits and like over time, it's going to catch up to you, especially when you have more weight on your body. It's harder to maintain that, you know. But yeah, I think the 5 that we named, Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Aiyuk, and Brown, in whatever order, I think are the consensus top 5 or should be for most people. Now that we're in the 6 through 10 territory, I'm glad that we have some discrepancy because I think it was pretty chalk 1 through 5. But for my number 6, and I alluded to it a minute ago, it's Devontae Smith. And this might be a bit of an unorthodox pick because he's a wide receiver too. But I think what he's been able to do so far in his career, especially at his size, we talk about AJ Brown being this like hulking monster receiver. Devontae Smith's like the opposite. Like it's like AJ Brown took 30 pounds from him and put it on himself. Smaller receiver, but very, very, very good route runner. Still wins at the catch point like that. Is able to get open, and he can still take the hits like AJ Brown does. I think all these, like the combination of these things, him also getting an early extension that if he performs at his level, he's going to be worth it. If he continues to ascend, he's going to be way like well worth it. And if he regresses, you can cut him early we talked about this model that the Eagles do all the time, extending early. When we're taking contracts into account, I think I have to have him on this list. And out of all the people I have below him, I think he's shown out more than them, except for one. But this person that we'll talk about later is lower because of that contract.
Yeah, no, and contracts kind of come into play here. Devontae Smith's deal was kind of team friendly. They got ahead of schedule earlier on in the offseason. And this is what's kind of set the Eagles apart is they're able to kind of identify here are the star guys that we want to invest in. We're going to take a chance on them early, and if it doesn't work out, like you said, you cut them a little bit earlier, but they were cheaper than the going market rate. That if they were to kind of bloom into fruition as kind of that star wide receiver, that now you got to pay 30 plus million. So
And
again,
and we saw it with Mailata too. They paid him
yep.
early. He was relatively unknown when they paid him, and it paid off handsomely for him.
Yeah, and that's just they're so smart about that. They extended was it Landon Dickerson this offseason
Yes. Hmm.
and got ahead of the curve there. The guard market has exploded in recent years. So just so cognitive of going on, okay, what's going on a couple years from now? Let's get ahead of that before it kind of bites us in the butt. And like Howie Roseman's the best at it. That is really what sets him apart as a general manager in today's NFL. So at 6, I don't have Devontae Smith. I actually don't have him in my top 10. He was a little banged up towards the end of last year. My biggest thing is I don't see as many explosive plays from him. Like you said, phenomenal route runner. This guy is excellent at the point of catch. Phenomenal dude being a previous Heisman winner at the college level, and then obviously making it to a Super Bowl with a very, very good roster. Like this is a guy that can play ball. Do not want to take that away from him. But at 6 for me, I'm going Chris Olave. I think this Ohio State product is really, really good. Like, I think he is the best route runner when we talk about that draft class when he was drafted with Drake London and Garrett Wilson. And he's just really, really good. The reason why we don't see more from him is because he's got Derek Carr throwing on the ball, and Derek Carr likes throwing the ball like 5 yards short and just playing it safe. So we don't get to see more of Chris Olave, but when we do, we see the explosiveness, we see the yards after catch, and I'm hoping over the next 2 years, like as part of this exercise, he is a guy that kind of takes a role to where he is an alpha male. He kind of plays like Michael Thomas in the sense of where it's just you're going to force feed me and we're going to win that way. And that's all you can hope for. Maybe Spencer Rattler's the answer in New Orleans. Obviously, as Panther fans, we don't want that, but that's something where I think Chris Olave can really take a step as a player.
I love Chris Olave as a player. He's on my list as well, a little bit lower. I think he's one of the best route runners in the league. He was really good at that at Ohio State. I thought out of all of the recent Ohio State guys, he's been the best route runner. Going back to him, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, even
Would you say
Harrison.
better than Marvin Harrison?
Yes.
Okay.
That's maybe one of the knocks on his game, and I'll talk about him in a second here. But I think what I have, or what's holding me back on Olave is you did talk about Derek Carr bombing the ball to like people in the upper level of the dome there in New Orleans, but there were some instances this season, and it was kind of hard to see where Olave would seemingly have a perfect pass thrown to him, and he would just hit his hands and drop and stuff like that. And if he can become more consistent, if we do this exercise again next year, he's going to be up there for me. But like I said, he's number 10 for me. Excellent route runner. I do think he needs to demand more targets because other than him on that offense, they don't have Thomas anymore. I don't know if Alvin Kamara is still there. And other than Olave, it's Rashid Shaheed.
Raheed?
Rashid
No, it's
Shaheed.
Raheed Shaheed, right?
I think
It's
it's Rashid.
Raheed Shaheed.
Okay, Raheed Shaheed. And then A.T. Perry, whom they drafted a couple years ago from Wake Forest. So it's not like world beaters at their receiver position. So I think he needs to demand more of a share there. Hopefully he does. But I think he's really excellent. And then, like I alluded to, and this might be a bit high because he is an incoming rookie, but I have Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he was the best wide receiver prospect since Chase, maybe even better. Like it's hard. Like you can debate that if you want. I think Chase was probably better because he was able to sit out a year and still be like talked about like that. But he has like no major flaws. Good route runner, can win at the catch point. Was able to do it with Kyle McCord, who isn't at Ohio State anymore because despite his 5-star status, he just wasn't good enough to get it done for him. He can what I say can win at the catch point. He's a little bit leaner than you think because of it. Like you see him making the plays and pushing over guys. He's a bit leaner, but he plays a lot like Larry Fitzgerald. I think he can dominate over the middle. I think he's going to work well in Arizona with Kyler Murray. He can be deep, intermediate, short threat, whatever you need to be. He blocks when you want him to block. That's another thing. I don't. He's like there's no major holes in his game. It's hard to poke holes in him. Out of all the receivers in this class, I think he's obviously the best. And I think when we look at building for the next 2 years, you got to look at the position the player is in. That's why I kind of had an asterisk with Devontae Smith because he's a receiver too. But Marvin Harrison Jr. should get a lion's share of the targets early on and prove why he should have been the number 4 overall pick, why he was the number 1 player overall in this class. Obviously, got to have our QBs going early because they're QBs. But he is that guy. He's him. Whatever else you want to say. And I'm looking forward to him showing out this year in Arizona with Kyler.
Yeah, no, I am too. I think Marvin Harrison, like sky's the limit for him. I think it'll he's on the trajectory where he's going to have a longer career because he really is a complete wide receiver. And if he takes the lion's share, he can step up like a CeeDee Lamb or even like a Justin Jefferson, where it's like you're able to demand that target share and you're really an impact player and you're generating explosive play after explosive play. Like he's going to be in the top 5 when we do this next year, like without a doubt. And he's not in my top 10, but it's one of those things that if he kind of steps up to the plate, he can be right in the mix of all of this. At 7 for me, I'm going a completely different position. It is the only time we deviate from the wide receiver position. It's weird because skill positions, we were going to allow wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. The value a wide receiver adds, and it's the reason why they're getting paid $30+ million a year now, is just so insurmountable that you really can't justify a tight end or a running back. In this case, I think you can because of the value of this tight end, because I think he's truly coming into the end of his prime and really going to be a huge catalyst for his team in the coming years. And that's George Kittle. I think he is just that good. I think he's that dominant in the run game, the pass game, his ability to allow them to operate in the 49ers offense in 21 personnel is just extraordinary. Him and Kyle Juszczyk really do help that offense just get mismatch after mismatch, whether it be a run play or a pass play. And I think him and Purdy have a great connection that's going to continue. And I think we're going to see, just like we have in Kelsey's early 30s with Mahomes, just an explosion from a statistical standpoint. And I really think he is going to be a value added dude to where if you want to trade a Debo or Aiyuk and lean more on these rookies and Jacob Coing and Ricky Purcell, that you can because of what Kittle gives you. So I'm excited to see kind of what he does over the next couple of years, but I really do think he is tight end 1 over the next little bit.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. We saw Travis Kelsey kind of decline this season. He's getting up there in age. I think he's 34 going into 35 this year, if I'm correct there. But Kittle, you talked about him being versatile. I remember 2 years ago when Trent Williams was missing time. He was basically their left tackle. They brought him
Yeah.
in line every play. He would help block. He would chip, do everything there. And then, like as a receiver, I think something that's super underrated is his yak ability. Every time I think about him as a receiver, I think back to, I believe it was a Saints game, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and to win the game, like the Saints just had to make a stop, and he catches the ball, breaks a tackle, like sidesteps one guy, basically like cartwheels another guy down the left sideline for 45 yards to get them the, I think it was the game-winning field goal, and that's just the kind of stuff he can do. Crazy versatility, and like you said, I think he's going to be tight end 1 for the next couple years, but for me, he's going to demand a like pretty big contract. And as a tight end, I'm not sure that value is there as opposed to a younger ascendant receiver. And then my other thing is it is age. Like even though he's still, I think in his prime years, like you're talking about, all the other guys that I'm naming aren't close to 30.
So here would be my retort to it from a contract standpoint. Like top of the end, like tight end money is like pushing like 15 to 20 mil range. I think it might even be a little less than 20 million. And so when you can get the tight end 1 that gives you all this versatility, especially in the pass game, I think that's where the position gets kind of underrated is when you have guys like Travis Kelsey, Mark Andrews, George Kittle. We've seen in the past Rob Gronkowski, where there's almost like a market imbalance where you have like almost a wide receiver 1 on your team, but you're paying them as tight end money. And that's where the value gets extracted at the very top of that market. I think below the like top 3 tight ends, it's almost like you're paying for what you're getting. But I think in the instances of these top dudes, I think you're getting more value at the tight end position. And it's why he's in my top 10. I think outside of those top 5 guys that we've talked about, he's really like next in line in terms of just value added from like a wide receiver playmaking standpoint.
And I agree with you there. my retort or comeback to that would be like, when you think of Gronk for the longest time with the Patriots, he was their receiver one, right?
Yep.
You think of Kelsey, other than when Hill was there, and even when Hill was there, quite frankly, Kelsey dominated that those target shares, and he was one of their main receivers. Has been the past few years. Where with Kittle, he's playing with Aiyuk, with Debo, and with Christian McCaffrey, who, if this weren't for like the next 2 seasons, if this was just best 10 skill position players, McCaffrey would be on my list. But because it's moving forward, I can't have him on there with his injuries and age and stuff. But with Kittle, are you really getting that I guess marginal value when you have a guy like Aiyuk or a guy like
Yeah.
Debo ahead of you on the target order, or excuse me, on the depth chart? Like, I think if Kittle were, let's say, a Carolina
But you can
Panther,
move off Debo and still have the value of Kittle for like
that's
10
fair.
million less. And that's where I think the value comes in.
I'm with you there, but you also drafted a first round receiver as well.
Yep.
So I think the expectation is or could be that they can move off a receiver and have a guy next in line. I don't want to diminish George Kittle at all. I think he's very, very good. It's just for me, like I said, I think top of the line tight end money isn't as impactful as like just top of the line receiver money, or even next level under receiver money, and his age. But I still think super, super good. But yeah, at number 8, we both have this guy on our lists, and the reason he's this low, you could argue he should be higher. He did make an All Pro team this year. I think it was no, he made the first team, I believe. He got paid in the offseason recently, I believe. He set the I think it's the most, other than the Tyreek Hill cap hit. I think he's getting paid the most, like average annual value. That's
Yeah.
Amon-Ra St. Brown with the Detroit Lions. He got a 120 over 4, I believe is what it was, so 30 a year. And he had an excellent season. He's been good, like really the past 3 years, but I think he came into his own this year. He's a monster over the middle. I think the guys that I would put ahead of him over the middle are like Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, and then he's right there. Like middle of the field, he's able to dominate. He's able to turn on a dime. He's just really good at exploiting areas like that, like beating linebackers, beating safeties, and then getting yak like that. The thing I have hangups about. Number one, I don't think he is as dominant of an outside receiver as all the guys I've listed above. Aside from
Mhm.
Harrison, we don't know about Marvin Harrison yet in the pros. And number two, we are factoring in contracts. And while the first 4 guys, Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Aiyuk, are probably going to get 30 or more, I think I'm more comfortable having all of them at 30 or more with their versatility and dominance than I am at Amon Ra, who I think has benefited, quite frankly, from Ben Johnson scheming him up rather the past 2 years.
Yeah, no, I think that's a factor there. I think there's a stark drop off from some of these tier one, borderline tier one guys and Amon Ross St. Brown, and that's not taking anything away from them. But you're able to play next to a guy like Jamison Williams and Sam Laporta and Jameer Gibbs and just that stout offensive line, and you have a veteran quarterback who knows how to put the ball kind of in play for you. And we saw what Jared Goff was able to do all those years with the LA Rams and getting the ball out in space for guys like Cooper Kupp and Brandon Cooks. And so it's not to diminish anything that Amon Ra does. It's just it seems like the environment is a big help for him, despite
Mhm.
all the explosive plays that he is able to offer and create and generate. And there's a reason why they're going to be one of the favorites in the NFC this year. And he is a big catalyst for that. So you have him at 8. I have him at 9. He's a good player. We're just worried that there's a diminished surplus value there. And for that reason, why I don't have Marvin Harrison in my top 10, I do have another rookie that comes in at number 8 here, and it's Malik Neighbors, another LSU wide receiver drafted this year, just 3 picks, I believe, after Marvin Harrison. And this guy he's a stud. Like you turn on the tape, the explosiveness is there. I'm getting like goosebumps that this could be Odell Beckham 2.0 in New York. And just to have that kind of juice. And at the time when they drafted Odell Beckham, Eli Manning was on the back nine of his career. He wasn't the same quarterback. You're hoping that he can kind of unlock not only the rest of the wide receiver room, but give Daniel Jones a consistent guy to go to that's going to generate explosive play after explosive play and really put himself front and center as the dude in New York. And so I don't think he has a guy that's going to question him for targets. I think his skill set is going to lend him to not only getting open, but then just completely dominating once the ball is in his hand. And that's what I see with Neighbors. So it's nothing against, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver one in this draft class. I think Neighbors' explosiveness is going to really give him an edge over these first couple years.
Yeah, and that's what the Giants have been missing, right? They had a guy like Jalen Hyatt, who's supposed to be a speedster, but Daniel Jones can't really link with him, right? They added Wan'Dale Robinson a year before that. He's kind of a shifty slot guy, but they've really been missing the true deep threat who can work both over the middle and deep. And Neighbors is quick enough to be able to get active in the short game and house stuff too. He has I'm not going to say he's Jamar Chase, but like Jamar Chase, he has that ability with his speed and explosiveness to have big yak gains across the board. I think he is going to unlock that offense under Brian Dable, who I'm not sure wants or is a huge fan of Daniel Jones, but I think he's going to help unlock all levels of that offense, be it Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, if he ends up starting any amount of games this year, because Daniel Jones does have an injury guarantee, like for not this year, but the following year of his contract. If he's injured, that money's guaranteed. So whoever starts at quarterback this year for them, I think he's going to help a ton. My only hangup with Neighbors is he, he's not like skinny like Devontae Smith is, but those deep shots over the middle, he can get bumped and moved off of his line a lot. And I think in the NFL, if he's going to get pressed or not pressed, but like over the middle, if Daniel Jones isn't throwing the best ball and he has to body like a DB, I think he's going to struggle a bit there. But I do think he is what the Giants needed, other than a quarterback. The Giants and the Raiders were the ones to miss out this year on quarterbacks. Some team had to, but I really like Malik Neighbors there. I think, like you said, he's going to get the lion's share of targets. He's going to dominate the target share, kind of like how I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will. And overall, he should just be really, really strong there. I think it's going to be fun to watch them, or to watch him, rather. I don't want to say it's going to be fun to watch the Giants, especially when Saquon
Their
Barkley leaves them.
defense,
Their,
their
their
defense
defense
could be
should be,
disgusting.
their D line should be pretty good, but other than that, I'm not super sold on the Giants. They might be looking for QB1 in this upcoming class, but I think Neighbors is really good. Like you said, you had Amon-Ra St. Brown next. For me, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, I have another Minnesota Viking in Jordan Addison. I talk about route running, right? Addison was the best route runner 2 years ago. He was wide receiver one for me in that class. Or I guess this past year was his rookie year, and he was really, really strong this year, especially when Jefferson went down. Uh, I believe Puka Nakua led in rookie touchdowns and yards, but Addison was right there with him. He had that one phenomenal touchdown catch against the Niners. I believe it was
Yep.
Monday Night Football that game, reminiscent of the touchdown he had against Stanford 2 years ago at USC. And like I say, the number one thing I value is getting open and running routes. And I think coming into the league, he was the best route runner in that class. I think he's already one of the best route runners in the league. And it's just he's stuck behind Jefferson. That's the thing for me. Like I have Devontae Smith at 6 and that high because he's shown growth over the first 3 years. He's been really good. He was a big part of that Super Bowl run. Hopefully, with the new offense, or not new offense, with the new quarterback, they're able to unlock Jordan Addison a bit more because I truly think he can be a wide receiver one at this level sooner rather than later. And I just want to see more of him. And then I talked about I had Chris Olave at number 10, but you have a new number 10 that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah. No, so just a couple points about Jordan Addison. He hit the 10 touchdown mark. He filled in admirably when Justin Jefferson went down and was still able to give Kirk Cousins a reliable target. And this is a guy that I think is going to make great plays from here on out. And I think having him on a rookie contract when you're extending Jefferson, you already got TJ Hawkinson extended. It's just really going to give a great supporting cast for JJ McCarthy. So I think the expectations should be low for the Vikings coming into the year. I think moving forward, this is a team that could really explode onto the scene with based on how Kweze has built it from a general manager standpoint. So I'm excited to see that. Excited to see kind of his role and involvement in that offense and Kevin O'Connell's scheme. But at number 10, I have a guy that was drafted, I believe, right after Jordan Addison, or was it right
It
before
was
Jordan
before
Addison?
Addison was
Yep,
the
the
last
pick
one.
right
Yeah.
before. Yep, that's right. It went Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, the guy that I'm going to talk about, and then your guy Jordan Addison. But what I love about Zay Flowers, he was my wide receiver one coming out of last year. This dude ran some filthy routes. But on top of running those filthy routes, this was a guy that just had a dog in him. Like a lot of people have talked about that being like Malachi Corley this year. But like Zay Flowers, he was nice with it from a route standpoint, but he still had that animal, that beast inside, and we saw it this year. He was a big catalyst in them kind of making a push for the AFC Championship game. And now with Odell Beckham leaving in free agency and him having to step up, it's going to be him and Bateman this year, along with Mark Andrews. So I'm excited to see the growth there, but I can see him taking on a larger target share and really being the dude not only in Baltimore but across the league. Like this is a guy that I think a lot of people are going to pay attention to, like Brandon Aiyuk over the past couple of years, or maybe I don't think he has necessarily the yak capability of like a CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase, but I think the talent is there for him really to kind of jettison himself up into a top 5 conversation, maybe in within like the next 2 years.
Yeah, when I looked at Zay Flowers watching his tape when he was coming into the league, and this might sound blasphemous because we're Panthers fans. You see your pictures, my hat, everything. But he reminded me of Steve Smith. Like he would go up there, and this is not a big receiver by any means. He's like 5'10", a
Yep.
little smaller. At like Addison and him are both smaller guys, but he would go up there and moss people and take the ball down from him and run him over. Like this guy truly has like a dog in him. I think he's going to be wide receiver ones like pretty quickly in Baltimore, and I do think he has the mentality needed to propel him, like you said, to a top 7, to a top 5 receiver like we're talking about. For me, it's just hard for him and for any of the guys that we're talking about to break into that top 3 or 4 right now, because I think Jefferson, Lamb, Chase are all so dominant, and I think Aiyuk and Brown are right there with them. But I really like Zay Flowers. He was my favorite receiver in the draft, even though I had Addison ranked ahead of him, just because of that mentality. And hopefully he turns it up the next couple of years. And because this is a skill position kind of list, we have a lot of honorable mentions, and I just want to talk about my tight end and running back ones because mine was a wide receiver list, just straight up. So I had Sam Laporta, really good rookie year as a tight end. I think he's going to be the next tight end one after Kittle, Kelsey kind of fade out of the picture. Mark Andrews is getting he's really good as well, but I think he's kind of getting up there.
Yep.
In our heads, I think he's still like a good player, but Laporta, excellent year. Brock Bowers, I truly believe in Bowers like I believe in Marvin Harrison Jr. He's just in a bit of an iffy situation in Las Vegas. Hopefully, they're able to take advantage of the 12 personnel sets with him and Michael Mayer, who they drafted a couple years ago. And then for the running backs, Bijan Robinson, just super stud. I think he was my 3rd rated player in 2 years ago's class. Really good running back. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, he just had an excellent rookie year. I think he's going to be the main guy there, like pretty easily to start the year. After Montgomery had like a 3 or 4 game injury spell, I think Jahmyr Gibbs really turned it up, and you saw when they were making their playoff run how important he is to them. So I'm a big fan there. And then there's a bunch of young receivers that we didn't mention, like DJ Moore, Puka Nakua had a really good year, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf. There's just a ton of them. It's hard to only have 10, but 10 is what we have.
Yeah, you got to cut it off at some point, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like it goes back to the quarterback ranking last year. Like after the top 5, it really does become hard because it's almost like preference, what you like more, what you expect out of a certain player, and that's where it's just almost like personal bias for like the next like almost like 10, maybe even 15 spots here on this list. I agree with you, Bijan. I think he was borderline top 10 for me when I was kind of putting the list together. I also think Brees Hall is going to look really good over the
Yeah.
next couple of years, especially with the pieces in New York. Like you said, Sam Laporta, I really do think that after kind of this old regime of tight ends have come and gone, he's going to be the number 1 tight end. So I completely agree with that. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has a stake in this. I love the fact that you have him at 7. I don't like him enough to put him there, but it's one of those things that I could definitely see him being in kind of the top 6, top 5 conversation when we're talking about a player and their contract value and him being kind of like on a rookie deal compared to all these wide receivers on these $30 million deals. So all that in mind, a lot of guys that are really good that we left off the list. And the only thing that I can say in regards to what I would take away from this to add to a perfect take, because we're in that segment at this point in the show, is I think, like I talked about when I talked about him at number 7 on this list, that George Kittle will be the tight end one this year. I think he has surpassed Travis Kelce. I think he will have an edge on Sam Laporta in that Detroit offense. And this is a guy that I really think is going to make a stamp and a case of why the 49ers are still one of the better teams in the league. And I think he's really going to let his presence known. We could see Debo traded. We could see injuries on that offense. But I think Kittle's going to be the main staple, and he's going to help carry that offense.
I like that one. Like your take, my take is going to be a guy from an offense with a lot of mouths to feed. Mine is going to be that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be the running back one this season. I almost said wide receiver, but he's going to be RB1 this season. I think if I wanted to like specify, probably fantasy RB1, but I think overall in the league, he has that. I don't want to say exactly like McCaffrey ability because McCaffrey's special, but Gibbs can be a receiver. He can run the ball between the tackles, get outside, stuff like that. He's just the total package. We saw at Alabama, he was their number one receiver that year with Bryce Young. So I think he's going to bring a lot to that offense this year. The only thing that I think would hold him back is similar to the Niners. Like there's just so many mouths to feed there between Monty, Amon-Ra, Laporta, Jameson Williams, but I'm stamping Jahmyr Gibbs as RB1 this season.
Yeah, no, I think he takes a step. He looked extremely explosive. It took him it felt like almost like half the year to
Mhm.
like fully get up to speed. And I saw even different video breakdowns of David Montgomery of just a little bit of patience and not immediately hitting the hole. And it took Gibbs a little bit longer, like, hey, I don't need to just hit the hole. I need to let the play develop because when I hit that hole, I'm gone. And so I think we're going to see more of that. And it's the Lions offense is going to be electric this year. I mean, the fact that they returned Ben Johnson and a lot of the stellar players, they're able to add some interior presence with Kevin Zeitler coming from Baltimore. I'm really excited about that team and just their outlook going forward. But we are wrapped up on this week's episode of Purrfect Takes. Shoot any questions to us on Twitter. We will post the content on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And next week, we're going to focus our attention on the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to rank our top 10 defensive linemen. So this is going to include edge players and interior defensive guys. For any of you guys that are interested in any of us breaking down players that might be outside of that range, just shoot us a question and we'll answer it.